Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man ittaqa. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I was saying, I remember when I was in college, I took English lit. Now, in English lit, one of the assignments was that they gave you a book with their different stories and things. They help him with his chin. No, help him. His honor's gonna say no. Get up and help him, man.
No, I'm okay. I'm gonna listen to him.
He might hit you with the stick.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Now, one of the poems that I chose, you have to choose one and bring it and explain it and everything like that. How do I would you listen? And it was Blink Your Eyes. The one I chose was called Blink Your Eyes. It was a poem, partial to poetry, the last poets and all, And the poem was about a black man in the 70s driving a Cadillac. He said he was pulled over, and he said he starts to say how the Cadillac was, and he had these seats and all this. Make sure your phones are off so you don't disturb the vibe of the class, guys. And make sure no lights is going off, okay? And he said that the cop pulled him over, and he said, he starts telling him, he says, your life, the poem was like, my life could change. Blink your eyes. And it really described how he started this day off. He worked, he got this car, and now he's just going for a drive. And he said, some people don't like you in some places, And he said, the cop tells him, get out, you know the routine, you know the deal, He said, what's the problem? He says, you the problem. He starts telling him, you're dangerous. We have to, and he starts telling him, and I thought that epitomized the day-to-day life of my life. Because, I grew up in a nice part of Brooklyn, where there are many mansions and everything like that. But we were like the only, we weren't the only, but it was like one of three in the neighborhood. If we went on the other side of Nostrand Avenue, immediately we were criminalized. In our neighborhood, we were okay, just the way we were. But on the other side of the avenue, which was only a few blocks away, New York, everything's condensed. A few blocks away, you get to Flatbush Avenue, it's now you look like a drug dealer. So blink your eyes and your life changes. And still now, how many years later, you could be driving down the street, and the lights plaque up behind you, and that's really terrorized. Because now you don't know if you're going to make it home. And you don't have to have done anything. Blink your eyes. Right? So I thought about that, and it's so amazing how people are so sensitive to those types of things. When I did it, why is this so dark? When the teacher at the time, the professor was like, your vision of life is so dark. I said, this is Brooklyn, baby. This ain't Long Island, This is Brooklyn. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Now, what we need is teachers' schools, teachers' colleges. Back in the days when we started having schools, colleges, a lot of times they were teachers' colleges because we need educators. Each one teach one. The first part of every lesson is to gain attention. The gain attention doesn't have to have anything to do with the lesson, as long as it gains your attention. Because if you don't get the student's attention, don't make a difference how great your lesson is, right? So that story was your gain attention, alhamdulillah. So let's start reviewing. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Tafseer 101 is what we're going to do. We're going to
break this surah down for every one of you. Whence it came and blend its name.
And just what it claims. Learn Qur'an. For Muslims learning
all around.
The word Qur'an, when broken down, methodically means reading or reciting piece by most of those who it's reached just in it through massive chain steel. The Arabic speech of Allah revealed to Ibn Abdullah, its words and meanings both preserved in none undisturbed, a standing challenge for all time. Okay, now I gave you the wrong poem last week. I was in my rush to get through these lessons. I gave you the lesson dealing with divide Qur'an for readers live in 30 juz and 60 years. Okay, now I was encouraged and I was trying to get there, but one of the things the teachers have to do is teachers have to be patient. It's one of the hardest things for teachers to do. The second hardest thing is to teach at the level of the student, not at the level of the teacher, right? Sometimes people get those things mixed up. But we're encouraged. We want the students to learn. But we can't rush, because if we rush and we skip spaces, that's when people stumble, all right? The next poem that's supposed to go in the line is the makeup of the Qur'an. What's it called?
The makeup of the Qur'an.
Okay. In the poem, it should say, first come letters, then its words.
Then the ayah must be learned.
Then the ayah must be learned. So let's write this down. It says first, there's the makeup of the Qur'an. Now, why is this important? We did Fassara yufassiru Tafseer from A? Okay, I'm sorry. Fassara yufassiru Tafseer from A? Explain the meaning. So meanings of the words. With what came down and reasons why used first, of course. Then find a source. Sahaba when they. The language lends a opinions come. Not all conform. Some deviate and it's very important that we be level-headed and that we be realistic, because that's why we said opinions come, not all conform. We have to get away from this mentality that if it's in a book, it must be true. Okay? Just because someone got published does not mean that that is anything. Just do it like this. Who's ever read the New York Post? Okay? Should that have been printed? Half the time it's a rag, right? Half the time it's propaganda, right? If not more than half the time. But it's published. Do you believe it? No. If you do, I got the Brooklyn Business selling you, right? So just because something is published, just because someone wrote a book and said this is book of Tafseer, and they put down their opinion, does not mean that it conforms. What should it conform with? Qur'an, then a source from the Sunnah, Sahabas if they, the language. Now it has to conform with all of that in order for the opinion to be worthy of ittiba or consideration. Because an opinion is only to be considered. You're not forced to take by an opinion. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes.
The beauty of Islam is also the difficulty of Islam. There is no scholar, there's no knightship, there's no, what we call it, pastorship. That's the word. Everyone has the ability to become the imam, even the woman, not leading the salah in that regard, but qadi, judgment, hukum, on what's going on in the sharia. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, let me clarify. Somebody says, Abu Talib says the lady can lead the salah. And no, what I'm saying is that when you learn the laws and what they mean, now you are able to apply that, okay? And use that as a furqan to discern what is correct and what is incorrect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that ability is not on someone else. That responsibility, that's on everyone who has an aql, an intellect. And an aql is from the iqal. Sometimes we see people wearing the gurtra, right? The Fir'aunic cover, right? Sometimes we forget. You're just looking like the pictures of the Fir'aun with that on. And then you put the little black rope around the head, right? Follow me? Mm-hmm. That's called an iqal. It's from the same word of aql. How are they together? How is that the same thing? Now the iqal keeps your gurtra from falling off, right? We also take the iqal, and what do? We put it on the camel to hobble it, right? So now it starts going around like it's still going to go. She's still going to move around, and she's going to get away anyway. But at least she goes slower, all right? What's the connection between that and your intellect? Because that's what aql means. And actually, the aql comes from the iqal, not the iqal coming from the aql. What the difference is, what the connection is, and this is why learning the life of the Bedouin makes you understand the Arabic language better. It's called an aql because just like the iqal hobbles, the animal and doesn't let it stray, just like it keeps your turban or whatever you have on your head from falling off. That aql, that intellect, restricts you from doing things that are obscene and unseemly. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It keeps you from in the boundaries of Islam. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes.
So that's the connection between aql wa iqal, or iqal where you put on your head. Walhamdulillah. So when we see that, think about that as a term. The reason why I'm saying that is because we're in Tafseer. So explain the meanings with easy words too. So why we say these terms now? Because in the Qur'an is filled with terms that have been misinterpreted, mistranslated. Okay, we've been given the end, the fish, as opposed to a way to understand how to understand that term. So that when it says afala taqilun, don't you have the cognitive information of morality and history to restrict you from acting like this, that, and the other thing? Does that make sense now?
Yes.
As opposed to just the context of don't you think? Don't you have an intellect? That's very broad. Okay, and not as colorful as the actual Qur'an is implying. So, now we're on the makeup of the Qur'an. Now, knowing the makeup of the Qur'an is vital. It is very important. I want to make sure you know every single dot and dash and everything in the Qur'an that you can actually know. There is only one sign in the Qur'an that I don't know exactly how to explain where its origin is. But every other sign, symbol, dash, letter, everything about it, we can tell you. And you should know. It's not hard. It's not hard. So if anyone wants to get it, what's happened? You have any question about what does this mean? Why is it the noon so big on the pages? Why is the kaf? You guys follow me? When you're reading the Quran, you see that? Why are they so big in the back like that? I'll tell you. Because the Quran, as designed, the way we have it, it begins every page with an ayah, the beginning of an ayah. And it ends every page with the end of an ayah, to make it easy to read. So in order to manage that, and each line is every page is 15 lines. That's if you don't count the basmalah and the name of the surah. If you do that, then it's going to be 13 or 12. You know, each one of those counts a line. You get it? I mean 13 or 14, like that. So in order to keep it in the right space, when you need some space, they make the noon longer. When you need some space, you make the kaf longer. If you don't, then you can make it small. And that's the only reason they're large in some places and small in other places. Does that make sense? But to that detail, we can know our book and why the things are like that. This I'm talking about is the normative green mushaf that comes from Saudi. That's the one that we're referring to. That's the one that's in most use around the world. Okay? And so anybody has any other issue, we can explain all of them to you. But now we're going to go general. The makeup of the Qur'an. What is the Qur'an made up of? Now, the poem goes, first come letters, then their words. Here it goes. First come letters. First come letters. Did you guys get this in the text? Didn't they send it out? No. Okay, then let's recite it. First come letters.
Then their words.
Then their words. What's next?
Then the ayah must be learned.
Then the ayah must be learned. You know, learning the ayah is a lesson in and of itself. It's just a dars on the different type of ayah. We could stay there for probably a whole week of lessons or a month of lessons, showing and learning the different types of ayah, just so that we can become aware of those particular types of things. But we're not. Again, we're starting general. First come letters, then their words. Why? Because the smallest part of the Qur'an is the letters. Okay? That's why when we start learning the alphabet, we're actually learning the Qur'an. And you get the reward for your intention. Then you start learning the words. So when you start learning vocabulary, your intention should be, and your first vocabulary should be the vocabulary of the Qur'an. So that if you hear a word, you should automatically go, oh, that's in the Qur'an. And we have a way of teaching 80% of the Qur'an Real easy. There's a book written on it, and we've broken it down and made it into a nice little lesson, not one lesson, but a course of lessons where we teach you 80% of all the words in the Qur'an. And we focus on the vocabulary of the Qur'an. Because you might have a word like fataha, and it's repeated 300 times. So by learning the root word fataha, to open, you now know 300 words. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so we teach it that way, so by the end of the whole course, when you read the Qur'an, now you can understand 80% of what you're reading. Isn't that easy? Isn't that what we want?
Yes.
So that we can just on a linguistic level, but you just got to put some time into that. Okay? And we'll do that, inshallah ta'ala. So after learning the letters, then we have to learn the words. Then the ayah must be learned. Now we start memorizing. Okay? After that part, now you can start memorizing the ayat of Qur'an. What's next?
6,000 plus by all accounts.
6,000 plus by all accounts. By all accounts. Then after that,
We all have doubts.
we all have doubts. What does that mean? Anybody?
Maybe it's more, we don't know.
No, what the answer is this. The people of Qur'an there was a man, his name was Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, al-Thaqafi, rahimahullah. Anybody ever heard of Al-Hajjaj?
Yes.
Al-Hajjaj is famous. He killed a lot of people, okay? He was notorious, but he was a Qur'an teacher. He started out as a Qur'an teacher from Mecca, okay? But he did not, Abdullah ibn Zubair, you know what happens when you get into leadership sometimes? The children, the young people, oh, our family's in charge. They started bullying people. And it said that they bullied Al-Hajjaj. And Al-Hajjaj says, oh, you're not going to get away with bullying me. Okay, you're going to now take me to the Qadi, which is your uncle, and say I did something to you. So Al-Hajjaj ran away. And he went to Syria. And he joined into the army of Muawiyah. Okay, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, actually, the offspring of Muawiyah. He went to Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was a famous Khalifa. He was the first one to print money, okay, Islamic money in that regard. So Abdul Malik did a lot of great things. The only thing they blame him for historically was for having Hajjaj as his governor and making him a general. So he hires Hajjaj. And Hajjaj goes, he bombs the Kaaba. He set a catapult. Yeah, this is Hajjaj. Hajjaj was exactly that. He literally catapulted and blew up the Kaaba while Abdullah ibn Zubair is praying. And the Kaaba's burning, and he just kept praying. Like that, he kept doing it. He brought a whole army against, he surrounded Mecca and didn't let nobody get no food till they were starving. You could only eat if you came out, then you couldn't go back in. His own father left his army and joined the side of Abdullah ibn Zubair. And then Abdullah ibn Zubair went out and fought the army by himself. He fought all the way to the last rank of the army, fought back. They shot him with arrows. A balcony fell on him, and finally he was martyred. So they cut his head off and stuck him upside down, crucified him. Okay? Al-Hajjaj grabbed Abdullah ibn Umar and dragged him, made tawaf while dragging Abdullah ibn Umar around the Kaaba. This is the stuff that he did. Okay? People were hiding from him. You know who he killed? He killed Sa'id ibn Jubair. He killed Sa'id ibn Jubair, was one of the most knowledgeable people in the world at that time. And in fact, he was the last person that he killed. There's all the things. But Hajjaj, in fact, he was looking for Sa'id ibn Jubair for 10 years, and Sa'id was right there at the Kaaba. Nobody would tell. He was just right there hanging out. So he was so mad that nobody would tell. He's got a wanted poster for this guy, and he's at the Kaaba every day teaching. That's they didn't like Hajjaj, okay? So finally they captured Sa'id ibn Jubair, and they bring him before Hajjaj, and he says, look, because now Sa'id ibn Jubair was a black man, okay? And so Hajjaj shows some racism. You ain't nothing but a slave, and the son of a slave girl, right? Your name is not Sa'id ibn Jubair. Sa'id is being the happy one, right? Jubair, the one that fixes. You are Al-Qasi ibn al-Qusayr. You are the wretched one who's broken, as a Jubair is to fix. He said, my mother, that you claim to be a slave girl, knows more about the Arabic than you. And now Hajjaj thought he was a really great grammarian, and he was. Okay, he was very big in the Arabic. He said, yo, Who do you think you are? He said, so Saeed starts laughing at him. Nah, you ain't nothing. You think you're a big old zalim. You're just a little vulain. You're a little zalim. You ain't even a big zalim. You ain't even did much. You didn't even become successful as a bad guy, right? And he said, what are you talking about? I killed better people than you, meaning the Sahaba, okay? And so he says, I know, they forgave you, okay? Me, I'm making dua against you, and Allah's gonna get you. I'm the last person you ever gonna kill. And so he says, oh yeah? He calls his headman, don't take him outside, kill him right here. So he chops his head off right there in front of, right in front of him right there. Ever since that night, Al-Hajjaj didn't get a good night's sleep. He woke up every night with night tremors and screaming, He used to wake up screaming, what did I do to Sa'id ibn Jubair? What's going on? He's screaming, he's sweating, he's crying. And then he said, what's going on? It came, what's going on? He says, every time I close my eyes, they're pulling me down. He's having, these things are pulling me down into the, and I saw just recently some TV program on YouTube where they did an advertisement of a scary movie. And the lady lays down in the bed, and then the bed starts sucking her up in hands. So I said, whoa, that reminds me of what Al-Hajjaj is claiming he was going through. Very, very scary. He died in his bed of nightmare. Died heart attack in his sleep. And that was the end of him. But before he had died, all the time he's killing these people, he's doing all these things, he also was a Qur'an teacher. He was a hafiz of the Qur'an. He had them count every letter in the Qur'an. He had them count every word in the Qur'an. He had them find out where the middle of the Qur'an was. And all these different things, Hajjaj did it. And when Hajjaj wanted to find that we had the A-E-U, he was instrumental in making sure that was there. Because they didn't have it in the books before that time. So Hajjaj the bad guy and Hajjaj the good things that he's done as well. You get my point? And still he's better than us because he was in the time of the Tabi'een and we're way here. We with Trump. He was with Ibn Abbas, he was with those different people, Sa'id ibn Jubair. We're with Trump, Bush, Obama, and all these other different, Vulain. Right? Right? What's the man out there in Sudan? Bashir. Right? But, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Let's go back. So, they counted the words in the Qur'an. Now, he put threats on it. If you don't find it, I'm going to kill you. 6,000 letters. Okay? I'm sorry. 6,000 ayat. Okay? Plus. After that, all the scholars disagree. Is it 6,300? Is it 6,600? Is it 6,000 what? No one has a clear number that we can agree upon. So what we can agree upon, that is 6,000 plus. Okay? By all accounts, that's agreed upon. But after that, we all have doubts. No one agrees after that. So our stance is 6,000 plus by
all accounts.
Then after that,
We all have doubts.
no one's word is stronger than another person's after that point. Why? Because there's different qira'ah. There's different issues. Do you count the alif wal lam as a word? Do you count the wa? In some instances, they have different reasons, and they're all legitimate arguments. One thing we know in Islam is that we follow the jali al-Islam. Those things that are clear and apparent. Allah says, "Ittabi'um ahsana ma unzil," the best of what is said, which could mean that which is clear. Okay? That which is khafi, not so clear, ambiguous, then there's a lot of different opinion about that thing. Focus on the clear thing, because the thing that's ambiguous is not going to harm you. Is it going to change the quality of your iman if you don't know exactly how many ayat there are? No. You get my point? But that you believe kullu min inda rabbina, all of this from Allah. وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ. The people who are firmly grounded in knowledge, they say we believe in all of it. Right? It's all from our Lord. As this is the criteria for getting and gaining understanding, is to believe in it. Okay? So alhamdulillah, 6,000 plus by
all accounts.
Then after that,
We all have doubts.
and now what comes next?
A group of
words assigned to see or something that
amazes me.
Now this is the definition of an ayah. Okay? You understand? A group, say it again.
Words assigned to see or something that amazes me.
Come on, say it again clear, guys.
A group of words assigned to see or something that amazes me.
A group of words a sign to see, or something that amazes me. Like so-and-so's
Whose whole house was wrecked.
whole house was wrecked.
There's not even an ayah left.
Well, let us change our answers.
What do you say? Another quote? Next quote?
We'll change our answers.
You change your answers. Okay. A group of words, a sign to see, or something that amazes me. That is what an ayah is. We can't say that we're studying the Qur'an and we don't even know what an ayah is. Right? What is it? It's a group of words, right? It's also a sign that we can see. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and from his signs that we see are that he created the samawati wal ard. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, and even in our own selves, right? You get my point? These are signs that we can see. Or something that amazes me. You say so-and-so's an ayah, right? He's the epitome, the example of. That's why when we see the beautiful moon, say, man, that's an ayah. How beautiful. Look at the skyline. Look at the mountain. Look at the valley. Look at the baby. Right? It's an ayah. Something that
amazes me.
And now I said, like so-and-so's whole house was wrecked. There's not even an ayah. Now this is the classical example in the Arabic language of what is an ayah. It's a poem that says, so-and-so's whole house was wrecked. There's not even an ayah. An ayah. There's no sign of the house left. You get it?
Yeah.
There's not even an ayah. Ayah has become an English-sized word. I said I'm going to keep pointing out these English-sized words, right? What did Mom say? I don't want to see one iota. Ain't that right? What is an iota? It's an ayah. You get it? It's English-sized for an ayah. So we have these, have crept into the, not crept, but have been part and parcel of our cultural understanding. We just don't realize it. Because the Muslims have been part of the greater upper culture for years. They just tried to put a black wall and hide it. You know, since World War II. So that we forget that whole history and they make like they came up with something, the colonizers, which they haven't come up with nothing they ain't stole. Okay? Sure, they ain't come up with nothing they stole or pretended like they got it. And that's because they never expected you to learn their language or to learn how to read, right? So one iota is an ayah. That's what it says. There's not even one ayah left, not even an iota. One ayah left. One sign of a house there. Capiche? All right, can I go forward?
Yes.
Let's start from the beginning. First come letters.
Then the words.
Come on, keep going.
It must be learned.
Must be learned.
Group of words assigned to see or something that
Amazes me.
like so-and-so whole house was wrecked. There's not even. What's next?
500 ayah for
500 ayah for ahkam and
stories make up half Qur'an.
500 ayah for ahkam and stories make up.
Half Qur'an.
Say it with some love. Where's the rhythm? And stories make up
Half Qur'an.
half Qur'an, right? So 500 ayah for ahkam. The scholars of usulul fiqh say that there are 500 ayah just for ahkam. And stories make up
Half Qur'an.
half Qur'an, or half the Qur'an, right? But half Qur'an is poetry. Now, Scott, excuse me?
What's ahkam?
Ahkam, say that? Say ahkam. In English, there's two H's, but we only write it as one H. Say jalapeno. Say heavy. Health. They're two different. Say hot. You see there are two H's there? But we only write it down as one. I know jalapeno is not one, but we still pronounce it as an H sound. Okay? Arabic clarifies. We have a ha, right? And we have a ha. Okay? We clarify which one it is. Sometimes people say, well, I can't tell. No, we use it. We just have to show where it is. There's no new letter there. It's just reorganizing it in our minds. And then making that come out of our tongue. Ahkam. It's the plural of hukum. Hukum is a legal ruling, a law. From it is a hikmah. And it's coming from al-hakim, who Allah. Does that make sense? The wise one. So ahkam is plural of a hukum. A hukum is a ruling, and in the ruling, the spirit of the root it points to the fact that there's some wisdom to this ruling. Okay? That there is some wisdom that we may not even understand. But there's some wisdom to it. So what does he say? There's 500 ayah. They call this the iqtisad, the economics of the Qur'an. That with 500 ayah, all these different rulings come from them. But this is just something they say, and sometimes they say, well, this is for the five pillars of Islam. Okay? There's 500 ayah that point to the 5 pillars of Islam. Allah knows best. What we have found is that every ayah has a hukum in it. What did I say?
Every ayah.
Every 6,000, that's 6,000 plus. Yeah, 6,000 plus. Okay? Ayah have a ruling. Every single one have one or three things in it. Okay? Either a clear ruling telling you to do or not to do something. Either some reminder, which is a dhikr, a story. And tawheed. In every ayah, we will go through it. Inshallah, Allah give us life and opportunity. We'll do it. Inshallah ta'ala. Every last one of them. So, and stories make up? Come on, and stories make up? Now, why is the Qur'an, half of the Qur'an is stories? Why? Who could understand the wisdom behind that?
Tell us the story about others, I think, before us.
What's the benefit of the story? What'd you say, ladies?
To make it real.
To make it real. Why? How does it make it real with the story?
History.
The experience a mouse had. You learn from the experience a mouse had.
So with stories, we live vicariously, right? Meaning without the imaginative nature that Allah has put into our minds, we can now see that when it's described through words, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us, he warned us. He said, a wife should not describe another woman to her husband. Because if she does, it is as if he has seen her without her hijab. Why is that? Because a husband learns how to gauge his wife's words. He can hear what she says and picture that, as we used to say. Right? Tabassur, hal tara min da'a'inin. We say bil Arabi. Right? In the ancient Arabic poem, they say tabassur, hal tara. Do you see any hawdaj moving there? You know, so Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma. So here we can picture that when we hear things, and it's not just women. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna fi kalam la sihr." In ba'd al-kalam la sihr, right? Some speech is some magic. Now some people say, "Oh, he's depraising it." No, he has that terse speech. It can be depraising and praising, right? Some people got magic, and magic is a term here isn't used always in a derogatory way, right? It's used that, man, they can speak. They got the gift of the gab, right? And then in other ways, it can be used in a negative light based on who's speaking and what they're talking about. Because balagha and having a husnul kalam is part of manhood, rujuliyya, or ladyhood. That's what you say, somebody who knows how to say a word right, qalla wa dalla, short and sweet, right to the point, appropriate and timely, right? So this is good, and it can stir the crowd, right? Change the whole tempo of the vibe. So this is not just it can be used in both ways, praiseworthy and depraiseworthy, based on the speaker. So alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And we talk about Sahara Ayuna Nas, the people's eyes get amazed. You know, the man, he gets amazed with his wife, and he comes home and he sees her. This is praiseworthy conduct, and not de-praiseworthy. So let's take it and put it in the balance, inshallah ta'ala. So stories, because Allah created us, and He knows our nature, and He knows how to give us da'wah. Okay? And this is the beauty of it. Allah knows how to affect our hearts in a way that is most memorable. He created us, and we call this the qadr of Allah, but I define how He designed us to operate. Some people of the mind, doctors of the mind say you never forget nothing. I said that specifically Brooklynese. I seen Taha to look up. But no, you don't forget anything. If you can think about something that happened, all you gotta do is concentrate. Something that happened when you were a child, you can see it. Everybody who saw, what's that guy's name? The Godfather, right? Oh, now everybody got pictures of the Godfather, right? or what's the guy that was shooting? Al Pacino. Al Pacino in the, what's the thing with it? Scarface, right? Now, when is the last time you saw that? What, 20? If you think about it, it's 20 years old. That movie. Or more. But if you take a second, you can picture that. And likewise, the mind never puts those things to rest. So these stories and the language that's loose, and that's the beauty of Tafseer. When you hear the Tafseer behind the story, it touches you in a way, and every time you read it, you're reminded of it. Okay? And so you keep stepping over, and this is why it's called Mathani. The Sab'a Mathani, the repetitive themes of the Qur'an. Over and over in the redundant, not redundant in a negative way, but education is redundancy. We say a thing over and over again till you get it, till you finish the sentence. And stories make up? Hesitation? Kill. And stories make up? And we keep doing that. So it's second to, it's everybody knows that. And stories make up 500 ayah, 4 ahkam, and stories make up. And so you hear one part, the other part automatically comes out. And the beauty of it is this. What's the first story in the Qur'an? The story about your creation. Showing you how important it is to know who you are. And I say that specifically to African descendants. Because half the time we don't know what we are. And we don't care. So that's saying that I'm insignificant. My past is insignificant. Did you get the point? Where Allah gives us da'wah, He gives us a rule. The first story is who are you, and where you came from. Because that is important. If I say I want to get here, first I got to find out where I'm at. And where did I start at to know how far I've gone. And that's why we can't get nowhere. So, this is how the Qur'an does us, because the Qur'an also is not, we say we're reading the Qur'an, but really the Qur'an is reading us. Okay? And that's fihi dhikrukum, Allah says. In it is a mention of you. It's talking to you. If you read it and it's so miraculous, it's talking about your jacked up situation. In such a specific way. One time I was reading the Qur'an years ago, and I looked up. And it's talking directly to me. Anybody else? Somebody slip this in here or something? And it keeps doing that over and over again. And that in and of itself is a miracle that is affecting everybody that way. Capiche? And so stories make up. What goes next? Next up, the surahs. Walls around for the they surround. So now we're finished with the ayat, okay? We're finished with that, and now we're saying next up the surahs, walls around. For the ayah, they surround. So the next thing that we have to deal with in the growth and the graduation of learning, we said the letters, then the words, then the ayah must be learned, right? After we learn the letters, next up the surah. After the ayah, then we have to do the surah. That's the next thing up, right? Next up the surahs, come on. Walls around, say it. Walls around. For the ayah, they surround. And that's what tells you what a surah is. A surah is a wall. Okay? Back in the days, a culturally expanded city had what around it?
Whoa.
A wall to protect it, and to delineate its boundaries, right? And to keep the wild things out, the things that don't belong in the city. So these surah is called a surah because this surah surround these particular ayah, as though these particular ayah make up their own citadel. Each city has its own vibe. Atlanta ain't New York. Chicago ain't LA, right? And ain't nothing like Mecca. Each city has, and Medina's not even like Mecca. So each city has its own vibe and its own tone. And it has its own delineation. And Allah declares these for us by telling us which surah, what that, this is Surah Fil, Surah Al-An'am. And each one of them, that term, just the title itself is a lesson for us to understand the connotations that are left, the tone, the theme that is in Surah Al-Fil or Surah Al-An'am or Surah Al-Baqarah. Okay, do you guys get my point?
Yes.
So next up, the surahs, walls around for the ayah, they surround. Okay, what's next? Let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the very beginning.
Tafseer.
No, not Tafseer 1, on the beginning of this chapter.
First come
letters, then it's... Nah, I don't want to sound like you. Sound like a Gatling gun. Come on, let's put it together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Read it.
First come letters, then the word, then the ayah.
6,000 plus by all accounts. Then after that,
A group of words designed to see
or something that
amazes you.
like whole house was ready. There's not even 500
Ayah for Afghan.
and
Stories make up Al-Qur'an.
next up, walls around.
For the ayah
100 surah,
plus 14.
100 surah
Plus 14.
plus 14, right? Some
Zakiya,
some Makkiyah,
some Medine.
some Medine. Next up, the surah's walls around for the ayah they surround. 100 surah.
Plus 14.
Oh, come on, I'm not singing to myself. I don't mind singing it to you. 100. Next up, the surah's walls around for the ayah
They surround.
100 surah plus 14. Some Medine. Now, some people may think this is redundant. Why do we need to say this 114? So don't everybody know that? No. I learned, my younger brother is 10 years younger than me. Me and my older brother's like 3 of us and then him, okay? And he's 10 years younger, and I'm the middle guy, right? And we used to think, well, why does he know that? Why does he, because he did some stuff with it, why does he know it? He doesn't, we assume that the younger children experienced what we experienced, and they haven't. You know, and then they do things, you say, well, what's wrong with this guy? And then my mother said, well, he was born after you guys. He wasn't there. He doesn't have that experience. Okay? So we had to change that stuff because we didn't tell him. We figured he knew. And the same thing happens to our children. I tell you, sad as it may sound, you know, I don't know. I've been teaching since 1995 in Islamic schools. I don't know how many children that I know that are born Muslim that don't know how many surahs are in the Qur'an. I'm dead serious. They don't know. They don't assume that they know. We assume they know. They haven't a clue. Well, no, 365 is the answer most of the times. Because they must be one for every day, right? But we have to not only tell them one time, it has to be consistent. You know? How many times is there till they're 16, you tell them to clean up their room? They still ain't did it. 16 years you're telling them, right? I'm dead serious. You know? So, alhamdulillah, we got to make sure this thing becomes part and parcel of our common understanding. Okay? 100 surah plus 14. Some Makkiyah, some Medine. And we haven't emphasized the differences between a Meccan surah and a Medinan surah enough. We know it exists, but it's like, oh yeah, Meccan or Medina, but it means nothing to us. There's no context. Okay? So we have to start understanding, we will, because the next poem is about Meccan and Medinan surahs, after we talk about the divisions of the Qur'an. Okay? It's vital to understand the difference between a Meccan surah and a Medinan surah. Okay? Very vital to understand. There's a humongous difference in everything about it. And I don't want to blow it for you guys. I want you to come back to class. Okay? But I'll start the first at 82.
Before migration,
Mexican surah sparked the nation.
That's all. 82 before migration, Meccan surah sparked the nation. That's how it starts. So to know that 20 surahs, there's no doubt in Medina came about. So we have to know something. And when we get that and we start to have that understanding about what a Meccan surah did and what a Medinan surah is and the difference, it changes our read of the Qur'an. Okay? It changes what we look for in those ayat. And this is part and parcel of Tafseer. I call it the water under the bridge. You know? If you only got a little mud, it's not so good, right? You got to have some water, some deep water, so you can jump off the bridge, take a nice swim. Alhamdulillah. Next up, the surahs, walls around. Come on, guys. Has anybody fasted today? Again, next up, the surahs.
all around, for the ayat they surround.
100 surah plus 14, some Makkiyah, some Medine.
Next up, the surahs, walls around for
The
them.
ayah they surround. 100 surah plus 14, some Makkiyah, some Medine.
Okay, this is your lesson for today. Do I have any questions? Okay, now we are getting closer and closer to Ramadan. Okay? And for that reason, I haven't given you another test. Okay? But I'm going to give you a take-home test next week. It's going to be a long test because I've given you 5 chapters right so far, right? I gave you the introduction. I gave you, what? It's 4? I gave you introduction, then what I give you? The word Qur'an, then I gave you Fassara Yufassiru for Tafseer, then I said the makeup of the Qur'an, and then I gave you Divide Qur'an. For readers live in 30 views, 16 views. So they're not supposed to have it again, come.
That's the next week lesson.
Well, they'll get the lesson and they'll take the take-home test. Remember, tests are not to disrespect you or to make you feel bad. Tests are to let you see what you're supposed to be able to regurgitate. Okay? Regurgitation is the key. We have to keep saying it over and over. Those that memorize become gems. And those that don't memorize but understood, go to those who memorize and ask them to remind them. Okay? So you need to memorize, and don't think that because some of you guys are older than 51 that you can't memorize. Y'all remember a lot of stuff. Y'all always telling us stuff y'all remember about us. Y'all don't forget nothing. So but seriously, there's no knowledge does not become weaker when you become older. It becomes beneficial. Back in the 90s, I started teaching Tafseer, and I was teaching initially to the World Deen Muhammad, community in Kansas City, Missouri. Now these people, most of the people were in their 70s or older at that time. And I was, I don't know how old, I think it was my 30s at that time. I can't remember. But every lesson I gave of Tafseer, after the middle of the lesson, they took over the class. And then after I say what Allah said, what Ibn Kathir, and this and everything, then they would say how that is applied in day-to-day life, through life experiences. You get to take and go back? Because once they understood, now they were able to take it another level that the youngster couldn't do because they didn't have those experiences, still don't. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's the beauty of Tafseer. So Allah tells us those people who go to some of the houses of Allah, right? And yatadarasuna al-Qur'an. What does yatadarasuna mean? In this Arabic language, yatadarasuna, it doesn't mean like what we've been doing. A guy sits at a table and he starts lecturing you and he's saying, no. Yatadarasuna is that there is an exchange. Okay? One person is talking, another person is talking, they're giving this suggestion and it's going, and that's yatadarasuna. Mentioning a point and clarifying if it's within the boundaries of the conforming, right? The opinions conform or not, and why, and where from. Does that make sense? I call it the Abu Hanifa type style. Because he'll start with a subject and the next person, the expert, goes over here and he puts it to mechanics and he puts it to medicine and he puts it to the children and child rearing and this, that, and the other thing. And then at the end we have an understanding because we've been natadarasu, we've been studying it together. And that's what we're fostering here. So I don't want to see people sitting samitun, not saying nothing, because then you're going to go to sleep. But speak. Say that when we get to those points, especially here with the reading, okay? First come letters, then their words, then the ayah.
Must be learned.
Start again. First come letters.
Then their words.
Okay, time out. You can look at your papers. Looking at something makes you remember it more. Not looking at it makes you forget it. Okay? Go ahead.
First comes letters, then their words, then the ayah must be learned. 6,000 plus by all accounts. Other than that, they all been done. Root word or sign to see or something that amazes me. Like so-and-so's whole house was wrecked. There's not even an ayah. 500 ayah, 4 ahkam, and stories make up half Qur'an. Next up, the surahs all around, for the ayah they surround. 100 surahs plus 14, some Mekkiyah, some Medina.
Put that after this. Some Mekkiyah, some Medina. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. جزاكم الله خير. نقيم الصلاة.